continued, and stay tuned for more exciting updates and information. Dynamic music. Dynamic music. Hello friends, welcome to this exciting and informative video where we will be exploring a variety of interesting topics. We are thrilled to have you join us today. In this video, we will delve into the fascinating world of take you on a journey through the captivating realm of dynamic music. Thank you for being here with us. It seems we are live, which is great, just like every Friday. Right now, we are conducting a news technical webinar where we try to invite people with expertise in the field of airships and airship construction. And today is precisely such a day. My name is Pavel Filipov, and today we will also hear from Fyodor Konstantinov and Vadim Zubkevich. You have already seen Vadim Zubkevich at our conference, and not just there. This is a person from the team that will be involved in the design and development of airships as part of our project. This is a person who has already built airships in Russia, so he is a practical expert I think it will be very interesting for us to talk with him today and for you to ask your questions. Please make sure to write your questions. We always provide detailed answers to all inquiries. If there is any distrust, I saw that someone has already expressed doubts about the projects and airships. We also communicate with such people. We are not hiding anywhere, and we have answers, including for those who doubt what we are doing. So please feel free to leave any comments and suggestions. Don't forget that your likes and shares really help to greatly enhance our project. The more active you are, the more viewers there will be at the webinar, and accordingly, the sooner we will fly on our own airship. Just a week ago, I flew on an airship in Germany. I shared this during the last webinar and confirmed that airships exist and are in operation in modern reality. The companies that operate them are indeed making very good money. A detailed video will be released. I hope next week, as they uploaded all the material. There is a lot of material, and I kept thinking, great, I hope that soon we will be flying in our own flying machines. Before we move on to the technical part, let's take a look at how our project is developing in terms of its funding. And I can immediately say that the funding is progressing successfully. We are moving along our path, and more people are getting involved, including those who want to help the project, perhaps not financially, but with their efforts and contributions. Just the other day, I was communicating with someone like that in the comments. Fyodor, I will pass him on to you. This person currently wants to be on the team. As of today, we are approximately approaching the mark of $5 million. This is the total amount that people have invested in various different investment packages. Approximately, this is an impressive result, a beautiful figure of $5 million, which we have practically achieved in just over a month. Yes, this is not the money that has already been invested in the project. You know that you can invest in installments with monthly contributions of $50 to $100, depending on what is comfortable for you. However, over several years, you can contribute a more substantial amount in this way, acquire more investment shares in the project, and accordingly, at that moment, the project can also expect some regular funding, knowing when and what amount will be received. These commitments were taken on by 1,500 people. 1490, an additional 90 people, 1490. As of today, we have investors who have physically transferred money, which amounts to $453,000, or about 45 million rubles in investments that have already been made into the project. We have already paid out more than $50,000 in referral rewards to those partners who already promote the project more. And I congratulate those partners who are already earning with us, and I reach out to others who may still be considering. While you are thinking others are earning, I see that our partners are developing good social media presence, with great videos that have many views. This indicates that there is indeed a window of opportunity opening up for active individuals who can promote our project, and accordingly also gain personal benefits, so to speak, starting today. Moreover, the interest in the topic of airships is quite high. If we delve deeper into the countries, Russia ranks first in the number of investors, which is not surprising. Our main content is informational and is in Russian. It will soon be available in all other languages. However, out of 1,500 people, 50% or 40% are from Russia, while the rest are foreign investors. Here from Russia, there are 659 investors. I'm currently looking. So if we consider other major countries, there is of course India with 125 investors. Now I see from Germany, there are 28 people. From Vietnam, there are 91 investors, a large number of investors from Africa. Here is the French-speaking area. Here we have the country of Burkina Faso, 40 people, and Benin, 79 investors. I also watched the Côte d'Ivoire, and I think there are already more than 100 people, 79 from Côte d'Ivoire. This means that this region is also interested in the project. I see that investors from Europe are actively interested in the project, despite everything that is happening in the world today. Here I see Latvia with 13 investors. I already mentioned Germany with 28 people. Hungary currently has 2 investors, and Bulgaria has 24 investors. Belarus has 22 investors, while Austria has 4 investors. As you can see, even now, looking at the geography of the project, we understand that the project has truly attracted a diverse range of people from various countries. This is a very good indicator, and as soon as all the information is packaged, properly translated, published, and the work is set on a regular track, just like in our first project, I am confident that these results will significantly increase, and the same investors from India will likely surpass the number of investors from Russia, quite possibly. So friends, these are indeed the results we currently have as of today. We are steadily progressing with package purchases. For example, I look at the daily package statistics, and currently we consistently have around 20 to 30 packages being purchased by investors. Overall, this is a good indicator that we are moving steadily and consistently. I would like to remind you, we are still in the pre-launch phase. The project's funding and full-scale operations have not yet begun. We are just preparing. At the same time, we see significant support, and let's say the investors who are currently supporting us, while being in a sort of information vacuum, certainly have the best investment conditions. If you invest today at the pre-launch stage, you will receive investment terms that are, for example, twice as attractive as they will be at the first stage, which will be launched in the near future. By the way, we have already discussed this question about when we can change the stage, so this event is not far off. We kind of mentioned right away that the pre-launch stage would be short. That's how it will be. We plan to attract about $1 million at this pre-launch stage, but almost half of that amount was raised in the first month. Moreover, in the coming days, we will open up the opportunity to increase the investment package that you acquired at the pre-launch stage, and I believe that this figure will grow by about 1.5 times immediately. Many people now want to increase their contributions because we stated that the pre-launch packages cannot be increased once we move to the first stage, and that is true. So friends, congratulations to you. If you have already invested, you have secured the best conditions in time. And remember, you still have the opportunity to increase it, but there isn't much time left. We continue to work. All our work is visible. You can see that our personal account functionality is being updated to make it easier to work with 2 projects. We are currently actively finalizing the landing page and are starting work on the website. Overall, everything is proceeding in its own order. The legal framework is currently being finalized. Some issues require a bit more time, meaning they cannot be resolved in just one day. But I assure you that this will happen soon. We are not standing still. We work on the project every day, and I believe you can see that. On the other hand, the project itself is also making progress. There are constantly some negotiations happening. Decisions are being made regarding the team, the office, and various partnerships. Well, I think Fyodor Konstantinov will elaborate on this in more detail. Fyodor, I give you the floor.
Hello everyone again. I liked how you misspoke. Instead of the word rails, you said flights, and with airships, regular flights are probably more appropriate. So we don't need rails, right? Regarding the news, we talked about when the legal framework will be established. It is being formed. In general, the legal framework has been established. The main concept has been developed. The lion's share of the documents, about 90% of the entire contractual framework, is already prepared. Some final touches are definitely being made, and the project will be legally packaged. It will be safe. Investors will be absolutely safeguarded, and the project will be safeguarded from all sides. Everything will be legal, and this will happen as soon as next week. We will likely have news on Tuesday that, hooray, we are indeed officially cool guys and have very officially taken on the project. Definitely. This legal scheme is ready both from the side of the financial conducting system and from the Russian side. Receiving money is also a non-trivial task, and everything is ready for that as well. This is as per the legal scheme. Regarding the office, good news. We rented an office and found the Sokol metro station, approximately 500 square meters. Today I will send a video review of this office in Telegram. They have just finished a cosmetic renovation and painted the walls. Look, it's still in working condition. We were told that in about a week everything will be cleaned up and we will be able to drive in there. So, if you are not on Telegram yet, I think you are all already in the Telegram group. Today I will share a video there. Take a look and get acquainted with the new office. Here, Pavel Filipov just today proposed to invite the most outstanding and talented investors to the office who will generate a great idea for a non-trivial application of an airship. You can write your ideas in the comments under this broadcast on vKontakte. We will definitely read them on YouTube. This is regarding non-trivial applications. Everyone knows and keeps in mind the image that an airship is either for tourism, cargo transportation, or the transport of some oversized cargo. These are the most cliched ideas on the internet and in people's minds. There are a bunch of other applications for airships. You can come up with many ideas. And here's one that I liked, which I just shared. A person with the last name Lobov contacted me on vKontakte. This is definitely about how an airship could serve as a complete flying medical center or clinic that would move between cities and villages, providing medical services. I haven't seen such an idea anywhere on the internet, nor have I seen it visualized anywhere. And this is a very cool, non-trivial application of the airship. And we already have our first winner, and he won't be alone. So Vadim Vasilyevich can tell us more. We talked a bit about this story. Another ambiguous application of the airship. Vadim Vasilyevich, hello.
Good afternoon. I welcome everyone to this webinar. The airship is indeed a very fascinating and interesting technology, and there are numerous creative ideas that can be developed around it. I just remembered it had already been implemented somewhere in the 1980s by scientists who used a small airship with a very complex platform, developed like an inflatable web. They explored the tropical forests in Africa, that is, the upper canopy of the forests, which is practically inaccessible to humans, is about 80-90 meters above ground level. And the small airship took off with the researchers landing right on the treetops. And they were collecting beetles, insects, observing life, looking at what plants were there, in other words, conducting research. In general, scientific research is a very interesting and extremely fascinating topic, and there are many various areas where airships could be applied to help scientists better understand this different world.
So, friends, let's definitely generate some more ideas. We will definitely evaluate the top coolest ideas and invite you to the office to check out what will be happening and more. Perhaps in the future this will be realized and you will be the author of the idea for a cool airship. Let's be active, use our imagination, and think about their applications while the broadcast is ongoing. Meanwhile, I will share a bit more news. I was at the department at Bauman with Arkady, whom I promised to introduce you to soon. That introduction will happen shortly. With Arkady, we were developing a program for future aeronautical experiments that will eventually lead us to stratospheric airships. This program has already been successfully established, as it was formed with the launch of the first devices before the new year. These will certainly be serious devices, equipped with the necessary scientific equipment. It will mainly be used as relays like radio transmitters. a bunch of other equipment and devices related to the atmosphere and measurements, and all of this is part of the development picture. These are the first steps towards stratospheric vehicles. We will be implementing them in the near future. We will present the program to you in full. We thought we would raise the state's stratosphere in 6 years, but it turns out that experiments need to be conducted right now. And we will definitely start them, but the stratosphere will rise even earlier, and that also happened this week. We agreed and put together a certain experiment which will take place at the end of September. So, now we will be creating cool content, filming how everything is done, how it is launched, explaining why all of this is being done, and how it fits into the framework of our huge project. Yes, and there are also advancements regarding the large project, specifically concerning the first devices, their configurations, and sizes. I will definitely share more about this a little later. Most likely, once we get to the office, we will start telling you how everything will look with the designers in the office by direction, but you know, there is already some certainty and specific tasks are underway. That's about it for now. I can't recall anything else from the news. Oh, we visited the workshops, by the way. Yes, the inquiries regarding both the airships and the areas where production can be located are still ongoing. We even went to check it out. This week, Vlad Karina mentioned a huge workshop and told the guys, make airships. If you need to set up something, come over. Look, we have endless spaces here. We went, took a look, and in general, we made a note of it and said, okay, thank you. If it's needed, we will definitely come back. The first ideas are already pouring in. A greenhouse with cucumbers above the clouds. I agree, it's really cool. Also, I wanted to, okay, a little later. Because of the institutions they are writing, I just forgot which one and where, Kostroma either technical or polytechnic. They saw our webinars, saw our project and said, wow guys, we are ready to help. We have some 3D materials to share, and they have new ones related to woodworking that are super modern. They are ready to assist with fabrics and everything else. Let's collaborate. In general, support is coming from all sides, with a desire to help and a willingness to participate. We are writing all of this down in a list, outlining the functions. In general, I think as soon as the initial phase is completed, we will launch with great enthusiasm. So, Vadim Vasilyevich, well, let's move on to you and your story. Could you please tell me a little bit more about your profession? How exactly did you come to it? Why air travel after all?
Actually, we don't have any formal education in ballooning anywhere. Currently, there are no such departments, and one can only pursue a specialty in ballooning by the calling of the heart. I graduated from Bauman Moscow State Technical University. My specialty is the production of flying vehicles. It was expected that we would place a strong emphasis on carrier rockets. The department I graduated from was indeed founded by my closest associates of Korolev, and I was indeed a specialist in ballistic missiles. But let's go back approximately about 44 years ago. The year was 1980, just after the Olympics ended, and I entered my third year. And back then, when it was still MVTU named after Bauman, and not MGTU, there was a very good tradition of involving students in scientific and technical design activities as early as possible. The Student Scientific Society named after Zhukovsky was actively working, where people engaged in science, and alongside it there was a Student Design Society where students tried their hand at various interesting projects, designing different and innovative systems. And I was attracted to one of the groups of the Student Design Society. It was called GIALA. GIALA stands for the group studying aerostatic flying vehicles. Well, the name was indeed quite a bit more pretentious. Indeed, the reference to GERD refers to the group studying rocket motion. In fact, it was from this small group that all our rocket and space technology began. It was led by Evgeny Trofimovich Baida, a very interesting and very dynamic person, and he would recruit young students, fresh-faced and inexperienced, and immediately throw them into the fray. We would quickly grab the saw and file, the soldering iron, the welding machine, and start designing and building small flying ballooning aircraft. Participated in conferences and also participated in exhibitions. At that time, there was still the Komsomol. In the Komsomol, there was a special direction, a whole department called NTTM, Scientific and Technical Creativity of Youth. This department, the Komsomol direction, developed technical creativity among the youth and organized exhibitions of achievements in NTTM, such as and other related fields. I remember the exhibition of 1982, which took place at VDNH in the former Montreal Pavilion, which still stands today. Young specialists and students from all over the country brought their achievements. So that's how I spent the next 3 years in this GIL group. It ended with me starting to push for a redistribution of resources, efforts, and responsibilities. Because we were specifically assigned after the 4th year, I was assigned to the Tushino Power Engineering Plant. That is, it had already been signed at the Ministry of Aviation Industry, the 10th Main Department, Tushino Power Engineering Plant. At that time, it was working on part of the Buran. But since I became passionate about ballooning, I started looking for an opportunity to move to the Dolgoprodny Design Bureau of Automation. This is the only enterprise of the Soviet Union officially dealing with aeronautical technology. And I was lucky that both the DKB and the Tushino Machine Engineering Plant were all part of the same department of the Ministry of Aviation Industry, me, the 10th department. So I took a letter from the CEO of DKB, went to meet the CEO of the Tushino Machine Engineering Plant, explained the situation to him, and he wrote me a letter. I took this letter to the Human Resources Department of the Ministry of Aviation Industry. They took my folder from one cabinet, rearranged another cabinet, and I was officially assigned to the Dolgoprodny Design Bureau of Automation, where I started working in April 1984, and I ended up in the sector of Boris Alexandrovich Ivchenko, who had already spoken at this webinar, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or a week ago. He was the head of the aerodynamics and dynamics sector. As a young specialist, I started working under him and began addressing issues related to the loading of the airship. What loads should the airship be considered for? What forces act on it? How are they distributed? What internal force factors do they cause? And all this important information was then passed on to the designers and engineers so that they could design these structures. I worked in the ROS sector, both as a specialist and a bit up the career ladder, as an engineer and a senior engineer. But what happened happened. The year 1990 came, and things became quite sour for DKB. In other words, there was no work there, and no new projects emerged. And then I decided to move back no Alma Ata. I returned to the MSTU named after Baumann. But since things didn't quite work out in the field of ballooning there either, I transitioned to a related area that is closely linked to aviation. I moved into underwater technology. I began working with underwater apparatus. Basically, what difference does it make where to float, in the air or in the water? The physics is roughly the same. And that's actually a good thing, because when you transition from one direction to another, when you change your path, your horizons expand significantly. You see the achievements of other technologies, then you engage in something a bit different. While I was working on aerodynamics and dynamics there, here I focused more on strength, because underwater, of course, the pressure is enormous. You need to work on strong hulls, calculate them correctly, since weight limits are always present. You have to be able to design them so that they are not too heavy, so they do not sink the device, allowing it to float, the airship to fly, and the underwater vehicle to swim. The weight summary is, let's say, almost like a prayer. You have to constantly monitor and track the masses to ensure we do not exceed the limits, that we are still floating and not sinking, and that we are still flying. There were interesting projects I worked on, but they are not related to our topic, so I won't talk about those projects. In 2004, I was already fully working at Auger, the Aeronautical Center Auger. He has already designed large inflatable balloons, truly enormous, with a volume of 12,000 cubic meters and colossal payloads. There were such clients. And here, the prestigious Auger Aeronautical Center is inaugurated and officially commissioned for the next important and significant task. The Center for Infrastructure Projects requests the development of flying laboratories for monitoring high-voltage transmission lines. It turned out that we actually have extremely limited information. The high-voltage lines were built quite a long time ago. Indeed, most were built in the 60s and 70s. But there was no information about their condition or even exact location, geolocation, or supports. And the task arose. The Federal Grid Company became concerned about its assets inherited from the Soviet Union, realizing that everything needed to be inventoried and its condition understood. And for this, it is necessary to create colossal databases that will include all high-voltage lines, along with all their supports, the underlying surface, and their condition. And there was a task to design an airship that would simultaneously and efficiently fly and conduct a comprehensive and detailed analysis. Everything will be documented, including photos, video recording, laser scanning, and precise mapping of all power line supports, their accurate photography, their technical condition, understanding, whether all the guy wires are in place, the sagging of the wires, and what is happening under these wires, what has grown there, what has not grown, and what the distances are from high voltage lines to the nearest, let's say, objects. At the same time, the condition of the insulators was tested and viewed through an infrared camera, because if it is not the insulators, I might be confusing it with the wires and wire contacts themselves, because modern technology is remarkable in that the infrared camera can see differences in degrees, even along the degrees. And if you fly slowly enough, not as fast as in an airplane, but at the speeds typical for airships, which is around 190-80 or 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, then basically all the places where the wires are heated are clearly visible in infrared cameras. Additionally, the condition of the insulators was assessed. For this, an ultraviolet camera was used, because if the insulator is faulty, there may be some currents and leaks through it. At the same time, there is definitely ultraviolet glow, and it is also clearly visible in the ultraviolet camera. There were also two receivers in the radio frequency range of 50 kHz and 50 MHz, because if there are any issues with high voltage lines, they emit precisely in these ranges at the problematic locations. Two such airships were built. Specifically for this purpose, the subsidiary of the CIP, the Raskin Enterprise, constructed a hangar in Kirzhak for two airships. Everything was done specifically for this project. This was the beginning of the project in 1994. In 1995, active design work was underway. The design bureau worked very intensively because such extremely large airships with a volume of over 5,000 cubic meters had not been built in the Soviet Union and Russia, probably since the war. Throughout the entire post-war period, incredibly, the small ones were still being built, but the large ones were not. Therefore, there were a lot of questions. They needed to be resolved quickly. The deadlines were very tight, and somewhere. In the spring of 2006, the envelopes and gondolas were carefully transported to the hangar, and an air filling test for airtightness was thoroughly conducted. After that, the envelope is released, vacuumed, covered with a special net on a mat, and gas filling is carefully performed, meaning gas is poured in. Large gas trucks arrive, delivering about 4,500 cubic meters of gas. and the entire procedure requires around 5 to 6 hours. The gas filling of the envelope is done along with the careful installation of the nose reinforcements aerodynamic surfaces, while simultaneously meticulously assembling all the parts that go on top of the envelope, such as cable components and navigation lights, which are difficult to access later. So it is better to assemble everything at once. The gondola was brought in approximately 2 weeks later, and the assembly and adjustment of the airship began. Since the airship was already being built using modern and advanced technologies, we had no mechanical wiring from the pilot's joystick to the aerodynamic controls, as was the case with Zeppelins, where people essentially operated the steering wheel just like on a ship. One turn of the control stick meant a deflection of the rudder by 2 degrees. Everything was modern. The pilots had joysticks and screens that displayed the current status of the rudders. Digital exchange occurred between the 2 central computers, which carefully processed data from the joysticks and transmitted it seamlessly, and precisely in a seamless manner, to the command controllers that directly managed the drives. It was decided to install a total of 8 rudders, which means 4 plans of tail surfaces. There were 8 rudders, which were designed. This was done in order to increase the safety reserve, and the extreme sections of the rudders could be effectively used to counteract the roll oscillations. And so the creation and development of this system, the remote control system, that is, the fly-by-wire system, took some time, plus there were instruments and equipment, and we spent the entire summer of 2006 working on it. It was a time that was both crazy and interesting. I remember now, as I recall, it flew by for me like one day because it was continuous work. 12 hours a day, constantly shuttling between Moscow and Kurzhak. It got to the point where I would sit at work all day. Until the end, while the designers started to leave, I was solving some issues. After that, I jumped into the car and drove to Kurzhak. Because there were flights in the morning, I needed to be present for the flights. In other words, so that in the evening, when the roads are free, I can get there calmly and get some rest. And in the morning at 6 o'clock, I was in the hangar and attended the flights. It was an incredibly interesting time. And we built these 2 airships, delivered them to the client, they flew successfully, and they were operated. After that, there were more additional projects, and 2 more airships were built for the Moscow government. They were created as flying headquarters, but these airships unfortunately were never assembled. They just sat in boxes. So, there was no application found, and then, for some unknown reason, they were written off. I don't know what happened. I can clearly see myself well. I see that my ear is live and functioning. There was a technical question. For Vadim Zubkevich, why is there such a situation for the government? Did they continue to hold it? And were they not gathered? They did not lower it. Did not lower it. They did not build a hangar. They did not build a hangar as CIP did. In other words, there was some confusion between the departments. Someone was responsible for the airship, someone else for its operation, but no one thought about where they would be stationed, where they would be operated, or where they would be assembled. I don't even know why. I have never addressed this question. And there was another, the 5th airship, that was built. It was constructed for the French. Such a well-known French figure is Jean-Louis Tien. I was introduced to him as the French Senkevich, so I could better understand what kind of person he is. He is a very media-savvy individual, very famous in France. He wanted to explore the Arctic with this airship. Back in 2006-2007, everyone was talking about the impending global warming, by the way. We are witnessing it. 29 degrees on September 14th. I have never remembered anything like that in my entire life. It was so warm. And he wanted to fly to Africa in the airship to measure the thickness of the ice there and all that. For him, it was. He ordered this fifth airship. It was built and sent to France. There They carefully assembled it in the hangar at Marseille airport, conducted test flights, and handed it over to the client so that he could prepare for this Arctic expedition. It was also a very interesting project. If there are indeed any fans of the movie Taxi, the very famous French film, the assembly of the airship took place in the very hangar where the car is presented to the Japanese ambassador. Do you truly remember the very famous movie Taxi? They are just presenting a car for the Japanese ambassador, where there is a funny situation when the airbag deploys and it crushes the unfortunate driver with the airbag. It was in this hangar that this airship was actually assembled. It took off from there and in fact conducted test flights at the airport in Barignani. Barignan is roughly the same as Sheremetyevo for Moscow, Barignan for Marseille, and then he flew to Cannes. No, not to Samikan, he flew to a village near Cannes, Fayence, where the expedition of Jean-Louis Kim was based. They were conducting test flights and training there, preparing for a launch that was planned with great pomp right from the Champs-Élysées. They wanted to take off from there and fly straight north. But unfortunately, we had already left. Our specialists were not there, the French were left alone, and they started to cut corners, violating our instructions. In particular, they violated the instructions for securing the mooring mast. They replaced our columns that we handed over to them. They said that they are very heavy, inconvenient, and bulky, making them difficult to work with. We will come up with a lighter mast mounting. And what did this lead to? When a very strong, let's say, squally wind came from the sea, from the Mediterranean, it was still winter. The Mistral was blowing. This airship tore the mast out of the ground, from the wet soil where it had been raining, and dragged it along like a carrot, since it was an airfield, overturning electric motor planes along the way. And yes, it reached some building, and there it perished. Unfortunately, this expedition came to an end, and the French did not want to resume it after the destruction of this airship, which they caused out of their own foolishness, while trying to blame it all on us. They say the equipment was not quite up to standard, but I disagree. It was purely their fault.
And that's because the French have no business setting any records on Russian airships in northern Switzerland.
Maybe there were disputes? It might have been a bit cumbersome. We made everything out of steel. We should have used aluminum after all. This is a polar expedition. It was hard to carry all of this, but it was already too late to change anything because, as always, the deadlines are very tight. Everything needs to be done very quickly. And unfortunately, mistakes cannot be made, because correcting them on a finished structure is very, very difficult. Therefore, thoroughness in design is sacred. The less we do, let's say, what will need to be redone later during the testing phase, the faster the project will go into production, will fly, and everything else.
But here is indeed direct evidence that clearly violating the operating instructions.
No, absolutely not, no way. After all, people thought this was not done just for nothing. Everything was calculated. There are standards according to which this airship was certified. We have this, but they are roughly the same, just called differently in different countries. Here they are referred to as airworthiness criteria for airships, an official document accepted by the aviation registry, certifies that the airship has been tested and verified. According to these standards, generally speaking, the airship should be able to reliably maneuver around the mooring mast at speeds of up to 35.7 meters per second. Can you even begin to imagine the immense loads acting on that tall mast? And what kind of massive drilling columns were required to securely hold it in place, to withstand such tremendous forces? Of course, when that gust came, it was strong enough. It was over 20 meters, but there wasn't even a hint of 35 meters per second. And their sticky attachment, which they had there, just couldn't hold and was simply pulled out of the ground like a carrot. Can you imagine? You take a carrot from the garden, pulling it out of the soil. That's roughly how several fasteners were pulled out. She was carefully descending with 8 ropes to the ground, slowly and steadily. The ground there is soft. There was a field in Fayence. It's a typical airfield for light aviation. The airship was based there. It was all quite sad. We also lost several clients who were very interested in this project.
Well, I say it's good that all of this happened in France and not during the expedition itself, and no one was hurt, and everyone is alive.
Well, it's impossible to pull it out because of the ice. They were still counting on this fastening to hold in the ice. The ice is indeed much stronger than the wet, soggy ground of southern France. In fact, they also have rains in February and March. Everything there is green, the ground is wet. To be honest, when I received the news about this, it felt like a knife to the heart. So much effort was put into this apparatus. It was very sad. The experience was, by the way, very interesting because they hired a very, very famous American pilot for this expedition, who unfortunately is now deceased. At that time, he was the most, let's say, decorated pilot. The most experienced airship pilot. He has logged approximately 17,000 hours of flight time on airships, with over 17,000 hours in total. And he started flying in this airship. Moreover, he began to fly in a completely different way than we did. It was all very interesting to watch how he managed everything. And I say again that I must emphasize that piloting an airship is not particularly difficult. The airship is indeed stable. It will not fall anywhere. When you fly along the route, you don't need extraordinary skills like those of a fighter pilot. It's a relatively routine job, so to speak. The challenges begin when you need to dock because, unfortunately, the airship is not very maneuverable at low speeds, and the controls become significantly less effective. We tried to manage by turning the engine and using differential thrust from the 2 propellers. They just turned in different ways. We could create moments even around the vertical axis. But by the way, our pilots flew, but not as skillfully as this Corky. Corky is his nickname, which literally means the cork from a beer bottle. He really loved being called that. I don't know why. I would probably have been offended if he was called that. He loved being called that. He was already quite over 70 years old. But he, of course, those stages of takeoff and docking, it was just fantastic. How precisely he executed all of it. Well, experience is crucial for an airship pilot because you perform an action, but you see the result after a few seconds. That is, you must constantly calculate in your head what this will lead to, figuring out those very things. I am not a pilot, so it's difficult to judge, but from what the pilots have told me, it generally happens like this. You must constantly think ahead about how the device will behave in a few seconds or in several tens of seconds, and how it will react to your actions. It's somewhat similar to water transport, isn't it? They've already put it in reverse, but the ship still pulls forward. Not exactly, of course, because our inertia masses are not as large as one might wish, but something similar. Therefore, in the new project, we will certainly address all these issues. We will have maneuvering devices, and our control at low speeds will be implemented much more efficiently. We are thinking about this. We are also at the pre-launch stage, and we are already preparing for the launch. We consider, design, and think about how to do this, comparing various options. Then, when the launch begins, we will definitely tell everyone about it.
Vadim Vasilyevich, could you please elaborate on your role and your contribution to the construction of those airships, the AU-30?
Well, let's put it this way. Like any large and complex flying vehicle, it is the result of the collective's efforts. Although it is not a large team, it is not the Tupolev Design Bureau, nor the Yakovlev Design Bureau, nor the Ilyushin Design Bureau, where thousands of people work. Let's say that in the Auger High Altitude Center, he was already organizing his work in a somewhat modern way. There was a small core of permanent employees, and we had a lot of part-timers. Many of my teachers, employees from other aviation companies who were also interested in ballooning, took on various tasks in their free time, and worked on solving different issues. Additionally, we outsourced a lot of work. So, the design of the gondola and the design of the tail assembly were done for us by the OSKB SMI, the Experimental Design Bureau of the Moscow Aviation Institute, which has designed sports aircraft and various experimental planes. These guys have helped us a lot, both with the gondola and with the rigging, as well as with some other systems, that is, with the mechanics. Here is the remote control system itself. Of course, it was all done under our control, according to our technical specifications, which were developed for us by the Design Bureau of Industrial Automation. They are from Saratov, and the guys there are very professional. So it is a large team. The chief designer of the project, he keeps, let's say, the idea of what the apparatus should turn out to be in his mind, because it somewhat resembles the situation of the swan, the crab, and the pike, where everyone pulls in their own direction. We need to set someone straight and impose stricter boundaries on others. And when this is being designed for the first time and there are, let's say, no analogs, then it is necessary to come up with the frameworks that should be established. It needs to be designed in such a way that, first of all, the person is truly engaged in their work, so that it is not, as I sometimes joke, made so heavy that it could be cast from aviation iron. At the same time, it should not be constrained to the point where it becomes impossible to execute, meaning there should be ongoing meetings, dialogues, discussions, and proposals. You have to do a lot of calculations yourself, estimate, and constantly monitor the weight slot to ensure they don't go over. To argue, to force a redo if something doesn't suit you, especially in terms of weight or some design aspect. Sometimes it was necessary to insist on redoing things, meaning it was necessary to have something corrected again. And this is the kind of work of the team that I directed as best as I could, as I understood, to elaborate on the work and the team that I directed with utmost dedication and effort, and it, first of all, provides a lot of knowledge. It is important to note that this work provides a significant amount of valuable knowledge and insights. Now, when I start a new project, and I have already completed another project after that, and there will be yet another new project, this experience, as they say, is something you can't get rid of. You live with it. You would do many things differently, even at the stage of assigning the task. I would approach the design differently, with different solutions. It's a constant evolution. You move forward, and as you move forward, the people who are designing it also move forward, and you meet new people. They tell you something, and you start to understand something new. It is a very, very interesting process. I highly recommend it to anyone engaged in engineering activities or planning to pursue engineering. It is a very creative process, although, of course, there is a lot of routine involved. There are indeed many various routines because modern design methodologies and strategies are aimed at achieving as much as possible on the first try. In order to minimize the need for modifications and corrections during the flight testing phase, this requires a large volume of very careful design and calculations. This is a continuous transmission of information, load carriers, specialists, and designers, and experts. There are various versions of the project. The zero version, the first version, there is a constant clarification process. For example, we created a device in its zero version. We obtained a certain mass distribution. We start designing, we begin to look at inertial loads, we start examining aerodynamic loads, we begin to calculate the loads on some individual elements. We start designing these elements. They are produced, and it turns out that some are heavier and some are lighter. The masses are redistributed. Something needs to be thickened. Something needs to be clarified. And at some stage, all of this transitions to the next round, to release number 1, which is already more refined. So, after going through several rounds, not of hell, but of design, you eventually arrive at a more or less viable option that can, so to speak, be handed over to production. And when the deadlines are very tight, unfortunately these traditions are somewhat disrupted, and we tend to rush ahead of ourselves and start producing something, only to find that other components come in later, requiring us to redo things. On the U-30, there was an issue with the bow reinforcement. It had to be completely redone. The nose reinforcement that was initially designed and developed was completely discarded, and a brand new one was created because several factors were not taken into account, and it was determined that it would not withstand the extremely severe loads of wind speed of 35.7 meters per second and a strong lateral gust of 7.62 meters per second. Therefore, the nose reinforcement was carefully redesigned to meet these loads. It flew with it. There were never any problems. After all, the destruction occurred not in the nose reinforcement, but specifically at the point where the mast was anchored to the ground. What else, Fyodor? What else are you interested in?
Tight deadlines, tight deadlines. What is the timeline for building the airship?
Well, for the U-30, according to the contract, there was approximately a year initially planned from the signing of the contract to the first flight. Of course, we didn't fully commit this year. The first flight took place after a year and a half, but it was still very condensed. It was very condensed. It is preferable to spend about a year to a year and a half purely on clean design, so that manufacturing does not begin prematurely. We were still designing the cabin while molds for the fiberglass gondola panels, which were to be mounted on the aluminum frame, were already being made. And this already significantly limited us in terms of the cabin layout, because the matrices were ready and we had to work with them as they were, fitting within those dimensions, and arranging the instruments, placing the pilot, and considering ergonomics based on that. This was without the construction of the hangar, as the hangar was already prepared. The hangar was being built in parallel. The project was signed, and the construction of the hangar had begun. Moreover, we went there, and the hangar started to be built, and there was a large meeting where I argued that the hangar is small and needs to be enlarged. And they heard me. It was extended by another 12 meters. There was another section that was delivered there.
So it turns out that a year and a half after signing the contract, you took off. Well, actually, that's quite fast.
Moreover, I joined this particular project 2 months after the contract was signed. That is, a contract was signed, I was invited, but I couldn't just leave like that and abandon everything, because I had my own projects in underwater technology there. I needed to complete part of them and pass the rest on to the guys so that they could continue working. And as soon as I wrapped up all the matters related to the transfer, I started the design work in April 2004. A lot has already been done, but it was definitely necessary to increase the envelope shells. When I joined the project, it had already increased from about 4,500 cubic meters to 5, or even more, 4,200 cubic meters. When I arrived, the apparatus was already at 4,200 cubic meters, and we have now expanded the volume to 5,065. 5065 cubic meters is the cut volume, taking into account that the fabric was still made of lapsan, and the load-bearing layer stretches a bit better. Therefore, when we conducted the air pressure testing of the envelope, we made an accurate measurement of how much air we were supplying inside through the flow meter, and we measured 5,200 cubic meters. We consider that this apparatus had a volume of 5,200 cubic meters, despite the cut volume being 5065, due to the stretchability of the envelope under pressure.
It turns out to be 5,000 cubic meters, but actually 5,200. Yes, 5,200, that's the actual figure. And that device from which we will start, this formula of 500 by 500, or like before, the flying yacht, will it be smaller?
Well, to be honest, I can't talk about the flying yacht. There will be their own chief designer. I will tell you a little about this large 60,000 cubic meter device. If you want, I can share a bit more because we are also starting to think about it. Well, this will definitely be a very different device. This, again, is a new experience for us because we have never built devices with a rigid frame like a Zeppelin. I will explain why a Zeppelin-style design is considered, although 60,000 cubic meters is a volume that can be achieved with a soft hull using modern materials. After all, technology has advanced significantly, and there are now many synthetic high-strength fibers available, such as Kevlar, Vectran, and others. And of course, compared even to Lavsan, this polyester fabric is several times stronger, a more durable fabric with greater specific strength. And compared to the cotton bases that, let's say, pre-war airships flew on, there is really nothing to discuss. And, in principle, if we use contemporary textile materials, such as the power layer, which are very high strength, it is possible to build soft airships with a volume of 50-60,000 cubic meters, and, for example, more. But since we are going to transport people, this is my principled position. And Alexander Nikolaevich Kilin also says that there must be a frame, because the frame is safety. When we maintain the shape of the hull solely due to internal pressure, there is always a risk, and this risk is not the same as in flight, because in flight the pilot controls everything. This is a risk on the ground. It is necessary to constantly monitor the pressure, so that it is consistently, completely, and thoroughly filled with the envelope. Even in cases when airships of the new era, like the Skyship I know, there was definitely and undoubtedly one that was lost. It was lost because the pressure was not monitored. When the apparatus was on the mast, the pressure was lost due to a strong wind, and then a significantly strong wind came, and the envelope without pressure could not handle it. The rigid frame eliminates problems, meaning that there will still be pressure, because it is what allows and helps the frame to function. There will still be a sealed envelope that helps maintain pressure, supports the frame, and provides a more aerodynamic rounded shape, unlike the angular designs of past Zeppelins. The frame will always assist us, both during stationary periods and in the event of a loss of pressure at altitude during flight. Nothing serious will happen. We can slightly reduce speed to lessen the load on the frame, and we can continue flying even without pressure inside the envelope. Plus, the most important aspect is sectioning. If you have a rigid frame, you can divide the internal gas volume into multiple sections. That is, there will be some gas bags, and even the destruction of 1, 2, or perhaps even 3 gas bags will lead to nothing. In other words, the aircraft will retain the ability to fly, albeit not at the same speed, not as beautifully, and not as thrillingly, but it can return, arrive at the base, and land. There is no harm to the passengers. This is safety, therefore. The 140-meter, 60,000 cubic meter apparatus will necessarily have a rigid internal frame. Right now we are thinking about how to make it and what it will look like. We are already conducting some calculations. I strongly believe that in order to achieve our goals, my personal idea is that we should definitely still compare ourselves with the very best designs that have ever been made. Among such rigid airships, the legendary LZ-127 Graf Zeppelin stands out. We must, taking into account modern technology, surpass him in every aspect. We will be smaller, but we will carry more, fly further, faster, and safer. This is because we use non-flammable helium as the lifting gas instead of hydrogen. Unfortunately, these very terrible disasters, after which the era of airships came to an end, occurred because they were still flying with hydrogen. It requires very, very great care when handling the airship. That is, perhaps the crew was not careful enough and not adequately prepared for the largest airship, the Lizette-129, which caught fire. There are still debates about why it caught fire in America. Some say it was an act of sabotage, that it was a German airship organized by anti-fascists. Well, I don't know. Some say it was a mistake by the crew, in particular. The commander, who began to perform very strong, very sharp maneuvers while approaching the docking area, the platform. Although the gas had just passed, the wind was also very strong. Well, modern design methods and modern calculation methods, you must understand that such complex structures, which consist of such a huge number of elements, were designed back in the 1920s. It was still more intuitive. It was impossible to accurately calculate the strength of this frame using any methods, let's say even a simple calculator, or even through a graphical line in any way. This is experience, this is engineering intuition. But to be honest, I am ready to take my hat off to the fact that people without, let's say, such opportunities created such magnificent structures, and we, armed with modern knowledge and contemporary programs, must do everything better. It will be safer, the maneuvering will be faster, and it will be more comfortable for people. Overall, it will be a wonderful project. I dream a lot that it will come to fruition. My hands are already itching, and I eagerly await the launch of this project. Yes, as soon as the pre-launch is over, there will definitely be a launch.
Everything is coming together for us, and we have everything we need for it. Friends, let me remind you that at the beginning of the webinar, we announced a competition for non-trivial ideas for the use of airships. I see that they are already pouring in the comments. Once again, for those who have just joined and haven't heard, please write. Think about how airships can be applied in the modern world and in the future. In a visionary sense, imagine what this could be beyond the applications depicted on the internet, such as tourism, oversized cargo, container transportation, or perhaps new ideas, like a flying concert venue, for example, or a drone concert platform, equipped with speakers and holy music where it arrives and hosts a concert. There can be many ideas, as many as there are people, with each person having 10 ideas. Please write in the comments. We will choose the best ones, read them, and maybe even implement them. Those whom we mark with a check as cool guys with great ideas will be invited to the office. We will be visiting the office soon, sitting together, chatting, and maybe we will even start building something.
Fyodor, can I also throw in my idea for an original application? I came up with this completely crazy idea. A flying registry office, a marriage sealed in the skies. It's really cool, and I think it will be in high demand.
Well, yes, a palace, a wedding, why not? I also thought, I don't know where such an idea came from. I was probably generating an airship over Moscow using neural networks. And when you generally ask the neural networks to draw something related to Moscow, they always depict domes, churches, and so on. And somehow, 5 minutes later, I was already generating orthodox airships over Moscow. They were all adorned with iconostases, all with domes and crosses. I thought, well, why not? We have mobile churches. A flying one is also possible. So yes, guys, there are a lot of ideas. Let's generate them together. The palace in Braxochetain will definitely be in demand. And I think there will be a whole line formed there. The question is, what size can we afford to build the palace for it to be called that?
Well, it is quite large after all. This 60,000 cubic meter one is 140 meters long. It's big enough to take all the guests up into the sky with it. They will be able to see the entire ceremony from there.
I was also thinking along the same lines regarding sports facilities, for example, to make it a sports airship where there could be a climbing wall almost right on the body of the airship, where you could jump off with a bungee cord or do base jumping with a parachute. In other words, it's just a kind of sports and entertainment complex which is about something high altitude like rock climbing, because you are at a height. Here again, this is like a Tarzan swing. There are so many ideas that can be thought of, even taking an air tube right on the airship. In general, a sports complex is also cool. They say it's expensive, and I hear a lot of doubts like, oh, an airship is incredibly expensive, really? It needs an economic justification for its construction, which only makes sense if you think about how much it would cost to transport 1 ton over 1 kilometer, whether in dollars or cents. Everything boils down to this. Everyone is afraid to start anything and tries to find reasons. But I see that the whole picture with airships is like with cars 100 years ago. They made individual cars only for the elite on this planet, for kings, presidents, and others such as... And now, here are cars. From small to large, there are very many of them, mass production. I am sure that back then they also thought that having a car for everyone was impossible, incredibly difficult. But time passes, new technologies emerge, other processes are organized, and the economy changes. So maybe someday this is, I strongly believe, in my humble opinion, there will still be large sports grounds. Vadim Vasilyevich.
Yes, indeed, I am listening very carefully and attentively.
There are already ideas. Let's read some of them. An observatory with a telescope.
This has already been implemented, but not on airships, rather on stratospheric balloons. They are launching telescopes in the extremely remote and harsh icy region of Antarctica. Very interesting experiments are being conducted. What cannot be seen from the Earth can be observed from the stratosphere.
In theory, yes, the stratospheric airships that we will develop will be able to lift more powerful telescopes than those currently in use. Overall, yes, the idea is sound. So they say the idea is to create a rescue system for submarine crews based on a 200-ton apparatus.
Very reasonable. Well, maybe not even based on a 200-ton one. That's not necessary to save the crew. Crews don't weigh 200 tons after all. I think a 60,000 cubic meter airship will be quite sufficient for this task.
Here is the idea of a stratospheric power station, or a laser propulsion station, for microsatellites to explore the solar system and beyond.
We need to look into it. We need to think. If the atmosphere there allows for the transmission of such a large amount of energy that it can accelerate microsatellites, then why not? Raising a laser installation, I don't think there will be any problems.
Here are all the ideas of one person, Andrei Bulashov. He proposed using airships as intermediate supports for cable cars or lightweight bridges, where it is not possible to install a support. But I think this is no longer an airship. It's just some kind of static unloading mechanism, to which the same thing is suspended. An airship is still something that flies and is controllable, while this is a static thing. However, the idea is generally sound. In principle, such devices were also made for logging.
In other words, to avoid building a road in the forest area and moving the cut trees, cable cars with airship unloading were constructed. Such ambitious projects did exist.
Which country is this in?
In Canada?
In Canada. Wow. I wonder if anyone can find out the years when this actually happened.
It was in the 1970s that...
The 70s. By the way, there might even be a video. Recently we were discussing it as well. One of the crowd projects, Skyway, also proposes transporting, for example, some useful minerals along string transport routes. And we also thought, what if we simply unload it aerostatically? We could actually put much more in there. This is a continuation of the idea that something can be unloaded. With Skyway, it is possible to both unload and move.
Peter, but this is still more for temporary use. If you plan to transport something constantly, it's better to build a stationary one without aerostatic unloading. With the forest, we must move these supports, thus aerostatic unloading was advantageous there. So, you are here today and there tomorrow. This allows us to shift the cable line for logging, depending on where we are working. And if you already have a mine and need to transport from it constantly and regularly, then you need to build something stationary.
I agree. So there are absolutely greenhouses above the clouds. By the way, that's a very interesting idea. Why not? So guys, we definitely need to let Vadim Vasilyevich go. Absolutely. We agreed with him just that much. Now we will read your ideas there and discuss them further. And let's thank, yes indeed, Zubkevich, Vadim Vasilyevich, who was indeed our guest with us today.
Thank you very much. I am always with you, always ready to answer your questions, and I hope that everything will. I am sure that we will succeed. We have the experience, the knowledge, and the desire to make it all happen. We will do all of this. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye.
Wishing you best, Vadim Vasilyevich. So guys, let's take a little more time to brainstorm ideas for the greenhouse with cucumbers. As strange as it may sound, I think it's worth doing. They even brought such aerostatic systems. There are technologies like aeroponics, where the roots of plants grow without soil, a bit more. When we talk about the idea of applying this concept in the field of archaeology, it is essentially similar to its application in geology. In both fields, the methods and techniques used are quite comparable. This similarity allows for a seamless transition of knowledge and practices between the two disciplines. By utilizing geological principles and tools, professionals in archaeology can enhance their powerful scanners can be installed. Here is one of the devices, Airships for Africa, which was built and paid for itself with the search for just one kimberlite pipe. He literally flew out, found her with the help of a scanner, and was randomly destroyed by the pilot's vinets. But all his construction paid off because he found this thing. And by making such geological exploration airships, they also turn out to be archaeological. There is now modern technology that literally maps everything on the surface and everything underground at great depths. And this, as Vadim Vasilyevich said, can be used in science in many areas. And this is necessary and profitable. Mineral exploration for sure. Forest protection activities and tracking of animals, among other things. Here, Vadim Vasilyevich started talking about Aeroscan. Who was the customer for those airships with support scanners, those Lavsan ones, perhaps? We met with them at the beginning of this week. This is also one of the news items. We got acquainted there. The general director and the executive director of the current company, which used to handle this, came by. And they were just talking about forestry, and also about how to monitor animals, in nature as well. It is said that this is a really highly sought-after operation for which people are willing to pay money continuously. And so they have this position. The airship must operate continuously. If it only flies 3 days a year, that is not commercialization. Commercialization means 24/7 eternal flights, which means it's not just some monitoring, and if there is monitoring, then it involves forests, animals, water, and so on. And this state has the funds. And they say that yes, there is such a task for airships, and well, this is almost one of the first points that needs to be emphasized. This is the position of those, I will repeat, guys, men, who have already successfully applied airships commercially, scanning power lines. And by the way, they also see that this task can be continued. It was just that there was a series of events that led to the entire system falling apart. They say that if we indeed unite now and truly revive all of this, it will once again bring significant and great potential and immense commercial success. And they are absolutely and completely convinced of this. And then they said they did it, and now they will undoubtedly do it, seeing no obstacles to this. So what other ideas are there for firefighting in hard-to-reach forest areas? Well, fire suppression, yes, we actually need to consider more to understand what will happen. With this flow of warm air, how it will affect control, the overall suspension of the airship at points, and so on. But I have already spoken with our designers, and they say that in general, the implementation is possible and it will be much more efficient than helicopters or airplanes, which simply drop supplies at a specific spot in the water and fly away. The airship can carry a lot of additional water and can precisely fill the necessary areas precisely. There are also other technologies, such as not extinguishing fires with water, but dropping special bombs that will disperse a certain gas, causing the flames to simply extinguish due to the lack of oxygen. Yes, indeed, airships are currently being seriously considered for firefighting purposes. The idea is sound and practical. So here's the question. If we raise $1 million in a month, when can we expect the first flight of the airship? 1 year or 5 years? 1 year. This is what Vadim Vasilyevich said today, that since the signing of the contract, they plan to build a hangar and lift the airship into the air within a year. And it was the AU-30, which has approximately 12 seats with equipment and so on. The deadlines were missed, and it was raised after a year and a half, but this was one of the first experiences in building such relatively large vehicles. Now everything is based on experience. In general, it can be lifted within a year. The question of certification is a different matter. This is a military designation for airships as bases for missiles, defense systems, lasers, radar-guided missiles. This idea probably relates more to some past. Airships were used a lot in warfare in the past. Everyone fought on them. The idea is not new, and somehow I don't want to revive it. But now the war has gone much further. This is already hypersonic. They are almost planning to fight from space, but the airship is still more of a peaceful story. Yes, it is clear that imported aerostats are used as some kind of border security, air defense, part of the air defense system, and so on. And in our country, work on the production of these aerostatic complexes is now being resumed. It is unlikely that we will have any relation to them, because this is still a military direction, and I believe that we should not get involved, and many share this opinion. As for airships for peaceful purposes in general, that's certainly permissible and acceptable, and in fact acceptable. Here, ideas are needed. As for the military, yes, there are guys in Dolgoprudny who have the idea of creating a huge airship in the shape of a flying saucer, which would serve as a carrier for drones, missiles, and other equipment. The idea is utopian because such a shape of the airship requires a very large amount of energy for its stabilization in the air. They have already assembled the little one and brought it out of the hangar, out of the shed. They were able to stabilize it even by hand, let alone automatically with screws and other mechanisms. But for some reason, they are not giving up on the idea. They are inventing ways to use airships in agricultural fields. By the way, agricultural airships are probably a great idea. They could almost bring a combine harvester to the field while the combine is working. The airship could perform some other tasks, like spraying something or doing other work in parallel, while also monitoring the fields. This includes monitoring and assessing the condition of the fields using computer vision to see what is happening there. This is also currently a quite significant commercial sector. Then it can take this agricultural machinery and transport it somewhere further. In general, the airship should typically be used for agricultural work. And in this direction, we really need to think carefully. I believe there are many great concepts hidden here. Air logging. I don't understand the word logging. Let's see what it is. Logging, self-propelled flying vehicles. Logging system? Aerostat? Mobile support loader? In general, it's clear. It's a pretty old idea, but in general, airships, as I understand them, can be used everywhere, transporting things through the air. Anything, whether in automatic modes or in semi-automatic. Also, as Vadim Vasilyevich said, in Canada they used to transport timber like this, simply unloading it aerostatically and dragging it along some kind of guiding mechanism. I don't know. So, Pash, are you here? Not here. Pavel is not here. I'll go on YouTube now and see what's there. Regarding the thoughts and ideas, and let's be objective, friends, please write which idea from all that you have heard here you liked the most, and elaborate on them in detail. You can write in the chat or on Telegram. I love the dream section. Airships are what I dream about in a positive way. Thank you very much. Yes, the airship is quite close. There is a high probability that it will become a reality in 4 years. This is a fact. Why not make the airship an alternative to airlines? However, it shouldn't be an alternative. Indeed, it should complement existing solutions. For example, the airplane flies fast enough, far enough, and reliably, according to statistics, but there are places where it does not fly. Here we have a large area, and there is no intercity transport. There are only some connections between regions. You can simply expand the list of services of these airlines by providing them with an additional tool with unique characteristics like these. I think it won't replace, but rather make it better, larger, and more comfortable. Everything can be done. It depends on the task and the market. Well, that's all correct, but it's not necessarily tied to the task and the market. There is still such a thing as vision. It's when someone came up with an idea, infected the masses with it, and now here it is. It's possible. And they went and did it. And before it was considered impossible, I constantly talk about computers, and that's how it happened. With airships, we just need to generate a bunch of ideas, create several demonstrators, and consciousness will be unlocked. And please, the market will form itself around airships. You mentioned Norilsk at some point. Have you ever been there? No, I haven't. My wife was born there. Will airships be able to operate in the Arctic? Of course they will. This is, well, again. If the task is to design and build an airship for the Arctic, then the task will be accomplished. This is ordinary engineering, and we live in the 21st century, and everything is wonderful about that. Now if you order a car for southern countries, it won't even have a heater. If houses are built in the north, then they have a huge foundation, thick walls, and a boiler room nearby. If they are building houses, on the equator, no foundation, thin walls, and an air conditioner is installed. Everything is tailored to the task. And to build an airship for operation in the far north, where it is very cold. We can and must do this, and it will definitely be carried out. Even from the government, there is a request to prepare a program for the construction of such airships to accompany the Northern Sea route. They need airships ranging from 30 to 200 tons. In general, this is all possible. And it will definitely include casinos, they say, in the air. Well, why not have casinos if people like it? Again about vacuum airships, or airships with negative pressure. Is it possible to create them? Well, vacuum ones are simply impossible. Strength of materials says no. The shell that holds, the vacuum will weigh that it won't be able to. It has to float in the air to perform the function of an airship. But it will be so heavy that it will simply sink in water. It will have a vacuum. That is, all the lift force attributed to the vacuum will be multiplied by 0 simply because of the structure that is supposed to hold it there, the atmospheric pressure. To prevent it from collapsing back, this is impossible. I saw a really cool idea to direct a beam of light using an airship at night to a solar panel for energy generation during the night. Yes, someone recently even started spreading videos about how you can order sunlight, but it seems they plan to do it through space. And right now, yes, through some kind of stratospheric balloon. The idea was indeed very great. There was a significant project for a Russian-Japanese space station that was supposed to feature a huge mirror to collect solar energy, and send it here as a beam. However, as always, we had some political issues with the Japanese, and the project stalled. That said, I believe it is possible to use stratospheric devices as power stations in the future. They have a sufficiently large surface area. From this very apparatus, if solar panels are applied to it, considering that the atmosphere is thin due to the sun, there is much more solar radiation, and it can generate a lot of electricity. How to deliver it from the tartosphere here is also a problem. These are all technical issues, and they are all solvable. It is clear that any technical issue in today's economic realities has a second side to consider, namely how profitable it will be in relation to existing solutions. But it is technically possible. The only question is the economic situation and what will happen to the market at that moment. It may indeed be possible. Do you remember the glass bridge in China? Here, we could implement a glass or transparent floor on the airship, flying above in the sky and looking down through the transparent glass floors and seeing the world below. I truly believe this will definitely be a must-have experience in all tourist options. A disc-shaped airship with the capability of symbiosis with a cylindrical engineering tower, flying architecture for excursion services over the city. I am extremely concerned that airships most likely do not have many external designs which are suitable for quality operation, because the wind might not always blow from the right direction, or something else might happen, making it all such an incredibly unstable thing. It will be dangerous, and there is likely a really small number of common appearances of how everything will look, but the design of the interiors and functionality will definitely differ. Naturally, it is more about functionality that needs to be discussed. As for flying, yes, flying tours over cities. I also had an idea which was more related to imported aerostatic platforms rather than airships, but of very large sizes. It's like what our engineers did at VDNH. There was a large sphere here. I want to say a cage, but it's not a cage. In general, it was a place where passengers were seated. And he would tie himself up, go up, people would watch from above, it was like a tour, and then he would come down. And so the next generation of this attraction is a conditionally, gradually rising up a restaurant in the city center. Why not? Somewhere in the city center there is such a thing. You walk in, and it's like a full-fledged restaurant, and suddenly it lifts into the air, and you are looking down at the city from above. There are programs, everyone is eating, and then it lands back down. Aesthetically, it will look incredible, attracting tourists and visitors. In Dubai, it seems they have a similar attraction on the Palm as the one we had at VDNH. There seems to even be a table where you can eat. But this is not a full-fledged restaurant. However, I really think it would be interesting to move on to a complete space that rises above the city. Well, yes, you can also use the airship itself. That is, it is a tethered object, which I think is safer and easier to implement. But if the airship takes off from the city center with tourists, it's clear that there is also a restaurant inside. So what other ideas do we have? They emphasize helium, such as helium. The Americans also flew with helium. They hit the water and suddenly sank. They were in the Soviet Union. They unexpectedly took flight. How it all ended, well. And what? Cars crash every day, and every day they don't crash. There is bitter experience and there is good experience. There is. And how many planes crashed when they were just starting to be created? And how many helicopters? Question about the berths. Is there already a berth project that has been approved by Rostechnadzor, and what time is allocated for its construction? There is no approved project yet, but the projects themselves already exist. It depends on which hangar you are referring to. They are planned to be slightly different, including small, medium, and large. You can start in this order. Or you can build a large one right away, where both small and medium-sized vehicles will park. We are currently still developing this management decision and will start once we finalize it. Once we make a decision, we will announce it. Overall, the Kirchach was built within a year. Why are there no investors from China, Japan, USSR, USA, and why are there no startups or promotions? So, in general, I understood. Yes, there are no investors from a number of countries. These countries are called Ford countries, or something like that. Or maybe it's fraud countries. This is related to their very strict internal policy, which prohibits citizens from investing money abroad. And to avoid terrorizing or provoking ourselves, we simply do not engage in any activities there. But even though investors from these countries still come on their own, it is because the information reaches them. Still, it is possible to do this with the help of cryptocurrencies now, but it is all at their own risk. The concept of flying houses is indeed something that could bring the industry to a point where there are flying houses, flying restaurants, and everyone could move to a second level. Overall, it is likely possible. That would be cool. Well, just imagine, everyone has flying houses, flying restaurants, flying shopping centers. We move around in them. We fly from one to another on a drone. We don't tread on the ground. Nature is thriving. There is no need to concrete it. In general, getting to the second level feels like a task of a super civilization. It is really necessary for everyone to unite. But nothing is impossible. If the airship can land on water, then I want an underwater restaurant with panoramic windows, first to fly around and then to land, to observe the inhabitants of Baikal or Medusa in the sea like an aquarium turned inside out. Yes, the airship can land on water, and in fact, it's actually easier to land an airship on water than on land. And just like that, you can immerse an entire restaurant inside. Well, it's a cool idea, right? Inside a tourist airship. It can be calculated whether the effort will be sufficient to hold the screws down for a while and ensuring they are secure, lowering them to create some space. Additionally, it is possible to have a large pool inside the airship filled with the water from which it lands, meaning that a hatch opens and there is a safety net. Overall, the water from Lake Baikal can be used for servicing skyscrapers and high-rise structures. I don't know. I need to think about which one specifically. It seems to me that around skyscrapers, the winds are strange. Well, not strange, but they have peculiarities, and it's probably simpler. And we, by the way, have already done this in St. Petersburg. Skyscrapers have problems with cleaning the windows. Window washers don't want to climb them. I also used to think that, most likely, they would be cleaned by drones someday. Why not install them now? Cars have windshield wipers. Let's install wipers on the skyscraper to wash itself. Why not? And here in St. Petersburg, when they were building the Lakta Center, there is this large FANG. And next to it there is a large building that already has self-cleaning windows. But depending on the type of service being discussed, airships are planned. The modern airship will be able to land on rooftops like a helicopter, bringing something to a skyscraper without having to lift it from the ground up, but rather lowering it from the top down. Yes, it is possible. Construction instead of cranes, if it will be cost-effective in the long run. Yes, I had similar images in my head. But is it possible to bring concrete directly to the airship so that, instead of pumping it up with pumps, we could just pour it down from the top? It needs to be considered, but as an idea for builders, airships in construction, taxis for pets. Due to a discharge of something rich indeed for the Chubais from the level, although I think they would indeed enjoy being transported by air, and especially agricultural animals, definitely. In each fire station they have prepared as many airships as the city or any settlement needs. Well, ideally, yes. The military, evening restaurants. It transports tourists, passengers and cargo by day and becomes a restaurant by night. Who would refuse to have dinner in the sky above a glowing city? Just now, yes, we talked about it. It's actually a cool idea, a restaurant above the city. What kind of drive? Electric, mechanical, hydraulic? This question was probably out of context. There was hydraulics, the tail control surfaces. I remember there were machines like that on the tails in Kersach. The use of airships in arid countries to condense water from clouds and fog, including on their enormous envelope. A prayer closer to God. Yes, those were roughly the thoughts. A free freezer for seafood, to catch fish in the ocean, and bring fresh frozen products to the market in the city through the stratosphere. An idea. So, measure the speed of the ether wind. Repeat the experiment in the ventilation maw at a high altitude. Well, it's all for science, right? I definitely believe that science will be widely used. Delivery of spare parts to drilling equipment and also with a working crew. Yes, this is a mandatory application. Airships are definitely one of the first areas where they are really needed. In our country, for sure. Currently searching for fish schools. An airship with a screen for propaganda. I think that in the future, when screens learn to be, well, they have already learned to be flexible. It is likely that very soon we can make the entire airship a large screen. Of course, I don't want this hypnotic thing to have a negative influence, as it is said, for propaganda on consciousness and minds. But it is all possible. Energy relays are an innovative technology. Transforming the sky into a massive screen will be an awe-inspiring spectacle, even more mesmerizing than the breathtaking northern lights. Yes, regarding the northern lights, we will probably try to conduct an experiment in the near future to launch a stratospheric device. There is an idea on how to ionize the space that could potentially be implemented in the near future. The rental of the dirigible will be clear. Lepp said in a recent interview that absolutely everything that flies and swims should indeed be rented. So yes, rent out the airships, but they will be requested for rent. Definitely. So, the uncle is great. The USSR rules, there is no country, but people still exist. The airship is a collector of floating debris in the ocean. By the way, this is a really cool idea. There is this huge, massive garbage patch that disrupts ocean currents and the overall ecological situation in the sea. Everyone is thinking about how to remove it. If we make a 200-ton airship and transport at least 200 tons of waste per flight somewhere, like dumping it into the mouth of a volcano, for example, to set everything on fire, that's the question. It's a great idea to try to solve it this way. I need to think about it. This idea is top. My brother also recently wrote and shared an article about global warming. It is indeed accelerating and accelerating again. And today Vadim Vasilyevich also mentioned this. And there are indeed actually a number of areas and countries that will really go underwater. And my brother writes to me, Fedya, how are they going to move the infrastructure? Like, it can't be done without airships. Well, first of all, yes. And secondly, in general, the idea that people need to move somewhere and after all move upwards is cool. As a task, a super task like this, it's a utopia. We need to make an airship with interchangeable modules. Today we attach a registry office, tomorrow we change it to a hospital, and the day after tomorrow we switch to a cargo platform, and they will most likely be just like that. This statement is both logical and justified, as it is based on sound reasoning and evidence that supports the conclusion drawn. So I have read everything general. Now I will go back to VKontakte and take a look. The idea of collecting trash from the ocean has been lingering in my mind for a long time. So guys, let's wrap it up now. We're approaching almost 2 hours again. Please write down which idea you like the most, and we will definitely choose 2-3 of them. In the chat on Telegram, if you are there, wait. We will write who turned out to be the coolest person. Let's give some more time to generate ideas, because the recording is also watched not just during the live broadcast. And tomorrow, in the first half of the day, in the morning, for example. We will definitely choose in the Telegram chat, so if you are watching the recording, don't worry. Write in the pre-launch ideas chat about the use of airships. I will indeed share a video from the office where we are heading today. Thank you all. I suggest we wrap this up. Wait for new videos, follow us, help, support, like and share, invest, because we really need to absolutely build airships. By the way, we are investing everything in order. As for what Pavel mentioned at the very beginning, the figures for the project, the legal structure is being finalized, and soon we will start conducting the first financial operations, such as renting an office and so on. We will share and show everything. All right, thank you all. I hugged everyone and lifted them up. See you soon.